And we're live. So welcome to episode 3 of Taking Liberties. Today we've got Austin, myself, and Lee. So it seems that we're turning out to be quite a regular panel here, 2 episodes in a row.
Yeah.
So I guess let's start with the biggest thing going on in Australia right now. This was intended to be an Australia Day episode, but unfortunately we were all getting drunk. So let's talk about the Queensland elections, right? Now, none of us are Queenslanders, so it's going to be some...
My mum's a Queenslander, so is that
okay.
a tentative connection?
I've been to Queensland like twice.
Yeah, I've been to Queensland a few times as well. Yeah, there we go.
I think on average
Queensland.
we're one Queenslander.
Yeah, that's it. We're opinionated libertarians. We know about everything anyway, so what does it matter if we're not Queenslanders?
Well, you know, I'm pretty sure if I said Austin's just dropping his laptop all over the place there and it's getting recorded, it'll be hilarious. But I digress. To me, Queensland's basically, you've got a whole bunch of surf bums followed by Brisbane, aptly known for the Brisbane bonus, Horseshoe Valley.
I was asked if I'd been to northern Queensland when I wanted to donate blood this week. Is that like a thing? Are you not allowed to donate blood if you've been to northern Queensland?
I think it's got to do with the mosquitoes up there or something.
Oh, shit, yeah, like malaria. That actually makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, must have virus and lots of stuff.
But speaking of horrible tropical diseases, I believe they have an election coming up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That was like the best segue ever. Segue of the year. I don't know. I mean, I wonder how much it's a feature of just the unicameral parliament, but it just seems like Queensland elections are like the worst in the country. It's really like bargain, just absolutely like gutter level policy.
Yeah.
Do like fights to the death. Like it is like there's a barrel, and then there's like the ground, and then there's whatever is under the ground, and that's where they're scraping to find the ideas to sell to the voters.
Well, actually, no. I think it's much more insidious than that. So, so as a libertarian, I tend to like when governments go into discord, because if governments are in discord, they're not passing legislation, they're not passing away money. It's advantageous for me. But the thing that I can't help but feel cynical about what Campbell Newman recently said, where he said the only way to guarantee that there's a bunch of policies that have bipartisan support, like nurses, hospitals, more money for schools, right? All the stuff everybody loves, more cash for them. All of those policies, Newman has said, can only be guaranteed if the Liberal Party, the LNP, gets re-elected. They're saying they will reassess, and I know you can't, damn it, Austin, I know you can't see me do the rabbit ears, but, they said they will reassess, quoted, rabbit ears, election promises if they are not returned in majority, that is, if they go into opposition. And to me, this, I can understand where it's coming from, right? Game theory. If you've got 2 groups of people essentially promising the same thing, you have to put the incentive to say, well, hang on, if you vote for the other guy, then if we're both promising the same, we might not be promising the same thing. So I can understand where the intention comes from, but I think it's just backlash on it.
Well, it's a great example of threatening to take your ball and go home, essentially. I can admire the political tactics of it, to be honest, it only works so far as the other side isn't willing to say the same thing. At which case you just end up with no bipartisan support, and that brings you back to gridlock, which, as Vic has said, is not really the worst outcome from a libertarian perspective.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably the best outcome. I enjoyed the U.S. government shutdown. Not technically possible here in Australia, but I thought that promise was that threat was first of all slightly empty. I don't think it matters. So I think there's also a reverse psychology element to this, in the sense that now people who are on the fence, they're going like, well, look, I don't really like Labour because I don't like the brand Labour, but I like those policies, might now be tempted to go, well, the Liberals are just being a bunch of shit cunts. I'll go vote for those guys because I know what they stand for, rather than reassessing if they lose.
Yeah, I mean, I think... I mean, it's really like... Oh, sorry, you go. You finish.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, and it doesn't actually matter in Queensland because it's a unicameral legislature. It doesn't matter if you're in opposition and oppose something.
I mean, I think it probably speaks more to the ego of Campbell Newman and, like, just the kind of the vanity of politicians that he made that promise. I mean, he doesn't even need to make that promise because he's got 73 seats out of 89. Like, you know, Labor's got 9 seats. It's just the likelihood of a return LNP government is pretty solid. So the only thing that makes me think that he wants to say that sort of stuff is just he's got an ego and he can't handle the fact maybe that people, you know, might want to turn against the government. I mean, I just think it's an awful thing to be saying. We understand why it happens, but it's just such a crappy attitude that, you know, if you're not going to do what we want, we're just going to try and, you know, make as much trouble as we can. And I mean, that's what oppositions do, but it's still ugly. Like, it's still hopeless. So, yeah, I mean, I think the bigger problem, though, is just the nature of the campaign and the promises, like, just the way it's working out. I mean, LNP have done some okay things. You know, they've worked towards sort of selling some assets and some of that sort of stuff. But at the same time, they've also done the whole Vlad laws and all the bikie stuff is just an absolute shocker. You know, it's really... And the way that's played out, it's... If you want to look at what parliamentary debate looks like, or, you know, politicking looks like without any respect for civil liberties, like, that is it. Like, how the Newman government's gone about all this is just a disgrace. I mean, heck, it makes George Brandis look like a... You know, makes him look like Edward Snowden by comparison.
It's funny that you say that because, you know, Brandis is from Queensland.
Yeah.
So, but it's interesting there because, you know, part of the entire Vlad sort of, so anyone who's not familiar, Vlad is vicious, lawless,
association.
Something. It's basically an anti-bikie law sort of thing. We don't, like, not being Queenslanders, you can forgive us for not knowing what the acronym actually stands for.
Just Lawless Association Disestablishment Bill.
Thank you.
There you go.
But one of the sort of things that came in with that bill was a real pet hatred of mine. I know Austin's spoken about civil forfeiture before, but this entire concept of unexplained wealth. So, you know, they basically say, well, look, you've got this pile of money. You need to explain to us satisfactorily why you have this pile of money. It's not up to us to prove that you don't own that pile of money, that it was obtained illegally or something. You have to prove to us that it was legal. So, like, it's a classical reversal of the burden of proof. And sometimes it's tantamount to essentially 100% tax rate if you can't prove how you got your money. But the bikies have been fighting back. So Campbell Newman did this ad sort of attack on the Labor Party, blaming them for saying, like, you know, oh, there's this link between organised crime and the Labor Party, and it's the bikies. And we brought in these unexplained wealth laws that, you know, cripple the Labor Party's ability to get this illegal funding. And now the bikies have been donating to the LNP and saying, the LNP get money they can't explain because it's come from me.
Yeah.
And it's just been hilarious to watch that sort of unfold. I just wish it was getting more sort of national coverage because it's hilarious to watch on the internet.
I mean,
the principle of an unexplained wealth law is just incredibly illiberal. If you think about it in any sort of like realistic situation, that the basic gist is someone can come in and say, oh, I see you have these things. These things are now my things unless you can explain where you got those things, and those things were not as a result of anything that's potentially illegal. I mean, it's incredibly illiberal. It's a reverse of the onus of proof. It's essentially applying these seizure powers without trial. I believe that there's some sort of legal process you have to go through to get to apply the unexplained wealth clause, right?
Yes,
there is. It's not without a reasonable doubt, is it? Is it just preponderance of evidence?
Yeah. So it's the explanation that I got was it's very similar to the United States in the sense that you're not actually on trial. Your property's on trial.
Yep.
Yeah, your stuff is on trial, and surprisingly, your property has less rights than you do. So, it's a little bit. I sit there. Okay, so I have a basic understanding of law because I'm not a lawyer. So my basic understanding is like the stuff lawyers would go, oh, this all falls under the jurisprudence sort of how law's supposed to be. But law is actually a very technical practice, right? They're very they're very pedantic about semantics. So they're very obsessed with terminology, and you kind of sit there with a lawyer and ask them to explain this to you, and you just go, that doesn't make sense with anything I know or understand what law should be. It seems like what you've done is flip and twist and turn a whole bunch of vague concepts together to really try and screw people over, which is what the application of the law seems to be.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of what underlies the acceptance by people of unexplained wealth laws and things like that is the notion that we must do everything we possibly can to root out every form of criminality at any cost. Like there was an example of a guy who got picked up at the airport. Now, I got to say, this particular guy, he had like a dodgy passport, so a fake passport. So there's some other stuff as well, but he had like $100,000 or no, it wasn't 100. It was like 15 grand or something. It was a large sum of cash on his person, and they confiscated it, and he had to explain it. Like, because obviously there must be some sort of federal unexplained wealth laws as well. And I posted this up saying I thought it was terrible on Facebook, and my friends were like, "Why doesn't he just explain it? Like, if he could explain it, he could walk out." And it's like, well, yeah, but that's not how it's supposed to work. Like, if all he had was a big bundle of cash, and he went through the airport, he should theoretically just be able to walk through the airport. Like, there's no reason why he should be arrested. Now, we all know, every sensible person knows that if you're walking out with like $100K of cash on you, there's a pretty good chance it's connected to drugs. Like, we're not, I don't think we need to be completely naive about how that there are people out here who do use, shuffle around money from the drug trade, and I'm sure all three of us would agree that's dumb. He shouldn't have to. It should be legal, but the reality is it's not legal yet. But the attitude that belies that is, well, we can't let him walk out with that cash. Like, he has to be able to explain it. Like, there is no sense that, well, maybe we should let somebody go who might be guilty of a crime in order to preserve the liberties that we have. It's this, we must get all criminality at all costs, wherever it is. And if we get rid of our civil liberties, well, it's too bad for that. Like, and I think that's a problem at a grassroots level. Like, you need to sort of tackle that attitude as much as, the legal formal questions of, is the preponderance of evidence a good legal standard? Like, people don't care about that. They just want to get criminals. They want to bust criminals. They want to stop criminals. Well, you sort of, I guess, part of what we need to do as libertarians is educate people. Well, that's not. There is a price you can pay that's too high, and unexplained wealth is an example of that. So, yeah.
Well, but how do you do that? Now, I think the best way to do that is kind of explain what would happen to you if you were in that situation. Yeah. And most people don't think that they'll be in that situation, and they sit there going, well, look, when I came to this country, $10,000 was the limit before you had to sort of explain why you were carrying that much money. $10,000 is still the limit now. I do a lot of international travel, and $10,000 was still the limit. And I'm sitting there going, it's been 20 years. I'm pretty sure now carrying more than $10,000 is not going to be that strange for some people, right? It's strange for me because I have, I obviously have credit cards that are capable of, taking care of my payments internationally. But there might be some people who come from like a very cash-based economy. So I'm thinking, like Southeast Asia, who won't find it strange to carry a large sum of money, particularly $10,000.
I mean, when you look at the US, like the US has, because of the deep corruption of their own system, like it's actually, there's plenty of examples of where you can say, well, here was this person, they were traveling interstate, they were moving, they had a big bundle of cash, because poor people, for example, not necessarily, and the way their banking system works, doesn't necessarily facilitate the easy transfer of money across borders. So, you know, you've got these people, poor people, with 30 grand, 40 grand, that's all their life savings, they're moving, they're going to go buy an apartment, they're going to buy, you know, all their furniture when they're there, and the cops pull them over, take the money, and then they have to go through this incredibly difficult process to get it back. So I think, I mean, the only upside of the injustice of these laws is it provides plenty of examples where people get absolutely screwed. You know, I think there was an example where a hotel owner, I think it might have even been in Queensland, where there was prostitution and drug dealing going on. They did their best to try and stop it, and the cops still tried to confiscate their property because it was related to drugs, you know, and prostitution and things like that. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that we have to have those examples, but I think that's where you get non-libertarians. You say, imagine if this was you. Imagine if you were the one who had your property taken, and you have to fight to get it back. You have to spend money to get it back, and that's the reality as well. Is people say, well, you should just re-explain it. Well, what if? I mean, there was when you start looking at Ferguson and places like that, where you have to go to a particular courtroom on a particular day, and there's only a prosecutor. The only person you talk to is a prosecutor, not a judge, but a prosecutor. And you can say, well, you know, so you're actually fighting the system, not an impartial system, but an actively like a hostile system. You know, it's when you start bringing these things up and say, well, it's actually not as easy to say, well, we'll just explain it, because if they confiscate the money, you have to go to court to get it back. That's an expensive process.
Well, I sometimes find myself saying, look, it's not as if Australians aren't used to dealing with the bureaucracy, right? Like, maybe that's the way to sort of put it. It's just like, what if you had to go to, you know, say, Centrelink to get your property back?
Yeah.
Can you imagine? Like, it would be, like, people just shit there going, some people would actually probably shit their pants, because it's just like, it's a massive wait to get there, it's just a bit of a hassle. So,
and you have to book a lawyer as well. If you just say you need to hire a lawyer to get your own stuff back, I think most people at that point would be like, whoa, okay, maybe you've got a problem then. Because, well, for better or worse, sorry, Zeev, wherever you are, people don't like lawyers. So.
Yeah, but, I don't know, Austin.
I mean, the other thing is, I think it's really, really, really unfortunate, because the whole reversing the onus of proof is effectively implying that your property by default belongs to the government.
Yeah.
And your ownership of it is conditional on your proving that you obtain it in a way that the government approves of. And that's the basic assumption. The onus of proof being on the government has, for your body and for your property, it exists to imply that you own yourself and your stuff. And if the government wants to take that away, they have to make a very good case as to why that is taken away. The default is not that the government owns you and your property, and you have to prove to them that you should be allowed to use it and dispose of it when you see fit. And this is a minor instance, but you see instances of that cropping up everywhere. So there's the unexplained wealth laws, but also getting rid of the right to silence in New South Wales, and all sorts of these similar laws. That there's a very good reason that common law has evolved with all these protections in place, and why a lot of these things are codified in liberal democratic constitutions in different countries. Now, it's even more shocking that a so-called liberal government is pursuing these laws. I mean, it would be as crazy as a liberal government pursuing a lockout law. Although, it's also interesting to note that they only do that in some states. In some states, they're very opposed to them, if I'm correct. So the Liberal Party in New South Wales is pro-lockout, very pro-lockout. They've done that. And someone who knows a little better can describe that. Isn't the case quite in Queensland? Is that right?
No, it's the Labor Party running it. But speaking of, crazy and schizophrenic, let's talk about Prince Philip being knighted. I couldn't help but bring that up afterwards. I know you were on a roll, Austin, but
that's right.
Yeah. So we know a little bit more about this, and thank God we didn't actually do this on Australia Day, because if we did it on Australia Day, we would have only known that Prince Philip was knighted as part of the Order of Australia, and we wouldn't have known that it was a complete captain's pick by Tony Abbott, and we wouldn't have known that the entire cabinet was like in a little bit of a disarray, going that they weren't consulted. So Tony Abbott today actually said that he will consult cabinet more in future before handing out knighthoods, and that this was entirely a pick by him. So the thing that really interests me, so I'm ambivalent on the entire issue of knighthoods. So there's a part of me that, that read King Arthur back in the day and really sort of romanticized the idea of knights, like Sir Galahad and Sir Lancelot, the entire sort of gallant knights protecting the country. That has some romantic appeal to me because I read books about that. I'm also a massive Game of Thrones fan, so I like that entire, sort of aristocratic feel of like fantasy settings. However, we are talking about a country, a modern country in the 21st century, and I sit there and I go, I don't quite understand this, like what relevance that has to today.
I think that one's like I think it is relevant. Okay. First off, there's a whole question of should the government be handing out like gold stars to citizens for doing what they should be doing. Like that's true of Australia of the Year and all the rest of it as well. That's not just specifically knighthoods. But I mean, in terms of specifically knighthoods, I'm kind of okay with it because I think it taps into our Commonwealth roots and the history that we have in Britain, which is a rich history. And I think particularly the monarchy is an incredibly I think people underrate it. I think if you're going to spend 800 years trying to hobble the head of state and make sure they can't do anything to affect the lives of the citizens, we've pretty much reached that point. So I think in that regard, being part of the monarchy is great. We've finally got to the stage where we've gotten the one level of government theoretically completely out of our lives. We've just got to deal with the parliament now. So in that regard, it's okay. In terms of Prince Philip, I mean, I think it's kind of neither here nor there. I mean, his son was knighted back in '81. New Zealand knighted him not that long ago, or gave him some sort of honor. Like it's kind of whatever. Like I just kind of think, he's okay for a prince consort. Like if you look at the history of monarchs, Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip are pretty good on that list. But that's not a high standard to meet, and if they're going to have this privileged life above everybody else, they pretty much have an obligation to kind of do the right thing with it, and they kind of have. So, I'm sort of I think it's a great political sideshow. I think it's funny in that regard, but it's just kind of nothing. Yeah.
Well, so I mean, I'll give my perspective as both an American by birth and a colonial Australian by choice. I sort of have mixed feelings on the whole notion of nobility. I actually like the idea of having nobility and monarchy, but I think they should be chosen based on merit, not based on hereditary principles. So the idea of a knighthood, to me, is actually very appealing. The idea of a noble title which is given as a form of recognition, I don't have any problem with. It's a merit-based nobility, which to me is fundamentally superior and less problematic than hereditary-based nobility. Essentially, it's a form of meritocracy. Now, the basis on which these knighthoods are given is very important, though. That obviously, if you gave a knighthood to the sort of every Tom, Dick, and Harry, it dilutes the value of the knighthood. It no longer becomes. And to be honest, I'm not that knowledgeable of Prince Philip. I don't know exactly what he's done to deserve it. But if the Order of Australia was designed to be something which is really meaningful and is only given to the people who have done, the absolute most for the country, that would really be the standard upon which this knighthood should be judged. It's not, is he a nice guy? Has he done some good things for Australia? Is it, if we were going to have this order of knighthood in Australia, what are the standards we want to have for those who receive it, and did he meet those standards? As far as I know, the standards are not actually written out anywhere. That is sort of defined by who gets it. So if Prince Philip receives this honor, then logically anyone who has done more for Australia than Prince Philip should also receive this honor.
I think you definitely. I mean, you can definitely make the case that, like, as far as prince consorts go, you know, the spouse of the reigning monarch, like, he's probably done a lot of work in that regard. Like, I mean, as a libertarian, I guess my chief criteria for what makes for a good monarch is not doing much at all. So in that regard, I think he's definitely reached that criteria. But I mean, I think as just a positive, you know, like, I mean, the Duke of Edinburgh Awards is a pretty substantial, you know, invention, I guess, at a high school level, you know, of inspiring kids to do the right thing. I mean, in some ways, I sort of think the main issue is, like, the people who are going to receive. I mean, if you look at who's received knighthoods and damehoods so far, it's 2 military officers and a governor general, and, you know, presumably future governor generals as well. So, like, I doubt you're ever going to see a Sir Rupert Murdoch, even though, you know, undoubtedly he's done more in terms of media, you know, supporting the media than anybody in the last century. Yeah, you're not going to see a Dame Gina Reinhardt, like, who, again, has made a huge...
There you go. That's what we need. We need a libertarian knight, order of knights.
Yeah.
The Order of Hayek or something.
The Order of Hayek.
We need to establish this, and we need to knight people who have really done what's good for Australia.
I would really...
The Order of Hancock.
The Order of Hancock. No, but so the 2 major objections people tend to have is that when Tony Abbott brought back the knighthoods, he was asked about, you know, why are you bringing back knighthoods? And he said, look, I think that, we have this, exactly like you said, we have this proud tradition to our British roots, the Commonwealth roots. And he said, look, this is for, you know, Australians that have done something significant to help out the country. And one of the complaints is that, you know, Prince Philip is obviously not Australian. He's not their regent, so therefore he doesn't get the benefit of he doesn't have the benefit of being our king or our prince, right? It's just, you know, he's basically just the consort of the regent who happens to be the regent of this country.
But do you think people would have been more or less receptive if he had given it to the Queen instead of Prince Philip?
Well, I don't think the Queen can knight herself. So plus there's the
well, that's a little unfair.
To be honest, I actually think that's actually probably what it is, because essentially you can't make her Dame Queen Elizabeth II. You can make him,
and I was gonna.
Sir Philip Mountbatten, and I think that's essentially what it is, and that's why I actually kind of don't really care so much, because I sort of think, well, it's really kind of inadvertently sort of praising the Queen, because she's ultimately the driving force in that pair.
Yeah, and I was also going to say, if you tried to knight the Queen, technically her present title supersedes whatever order title you're giving her.
Yeah.
So
I mean, somebody made a pretty funny joke about, like, all the different titles he has, and he's got Prince Philip's got like 50 of them. Like, he's not, you know, he's pretty well recognised. But I think more of the problem is it's going to be essentially a cult of statism. You know, all the people who are going to get him are going to be people related to the state, politicians, governor generals. You know, it's not going to be people who have actually contributed in the private realm. And I think that's more of a problem of whether it's related to the monarchy or whether it's related to giving Australians their due credit. It's going to be a temple of the state. Having said that, if you look at the old, you know, because there is knights in the past and dames in the past, and some of them actually have made private realm, you know, private sector contributions. So I guess we'll see. I can't imagine the Labor ever. Well, I mean, Labor wouldn't abolish them anyway. But, you know, I guess it possibly could go down that route. But it's at the moment it's looking like it's just going to be the cream of the statist crop, which is unpleasant.
Well, yeah, and that defines the value of the knighthood, is the people who get it. Which, there you go.
And I was going to say. I was going to say, my complaint was pretty much exactly what you just said, is that, you know, Prince Philip is a royal. He technically gets all his money from the British taxpayer. So when he does, you know, charity, inverted commas, it's really no different from what the government does, in the sense that, you know, it's redistributing from Peter to Paul, you know, that sort of business. But, like, the thing is, Austin? Yeah. Anyway, so, is that Austin?
Yeah, that's Austin.
That is Austin.
I can't hear anything.
Okay.
Yeah, because your mic is making so much noise. Anyway, sorry, I'll digress. So
my mic is off.
Okay, good. Anyway, so what I was going to say is, say you do like if you're fanatically in support, and I do have friends that are fanatically in support of knighthoods, largely because they romanticize it way more than I do, and they were saying they were really upset by this, and I hadn't actually considered this. So one of the things about knighthoods is that they have to be popular with the people, right? People have to also sit there and go, yes, that's a good knight, right? That's a good person to name a knight. Because if people don't have connection with that, then it seems like it's basically a tool for elitism. And when it looks like a tool for elitism, it's
knighthood's being a tool for elitism? Perish the thought.
Yeah, perish the thought. But it's a question of optics, right? And if it's seen as an optics sort of like thing that's, that this is us, this is them sort of mentality, people are going to have like this revulsion towards this entire concept. And what some of my friends who were opposing this particular view said, like, I like knighthoods, but basically Tony Abbott has instilled this mentality that he lives in the 1950s where political leaders were trying to curry favor using the knighthoods and stuff like that with the aristocracy so that they could try and get into the aristocracy. By going like, oh, here's a state recognition for how great you are. By the way, we should hang out more often. Sort of thing.
Do you like me? Yes/no.
Yeah. And I largely agree with them. I thought that this, like, when I heard this, I went like, yes, it does actually look like Tony Abbott is trying to suck up to the Queen in a very obvious way. It's like, and I get the feeling that the Queen's just like, I like that you're into me, but I'm just not that into you.
I don't know. I mean, I think Queen Elizabeth's been through enough prime ministers and of multiple countries to not be kind of bamboozled by that stuff. I'm sure she's probably okay with it. I mean, yeah, it's I think it's an okay tradition. It's no worse than anything else the state could do. Like compared to like the Vietnam War or like the war in Iraq or like out of the billions of other the income tax, like out of the billions of different crappy things the government can do, like this is like way down the bottom. Who kind of cares?
Yeah, and just to sort of I just realized this is a concept. You know how people have been saying for a long time that Tony Abbott has a problem with women. He might be trying too hard. Right? That might be his actual problem. That he's trying too hard. Like,
well, all the awardees of the Australian of the Year are all women, so I don't think it's probably by coincidence.
No, I don't think that's by coincidence either.
Well, shall we call it a night?
Yeah, sure.
Nice.
Let's call it a night.
Virtual high five for that pun.
Yeah.
I did a great service.
Always in with the puns.
You did your damnedest to end this show.
Well, in that case, it's been another great episode, and I think we've run a little bit over time, haven't we? Okay,
yep.
So we'll make up
the end of Red Dawn. It's very upsetting.
It doesn't matter. Your static from your mic will cut out, and I'm sure it'll package into a nicer, smaller episode. But anyway, it's been a great episode. So same that channel, same that time next week. All right,
Bye.
See ya.